Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Spiders Sound Off. This is Tom.
And this is Porter.
And we have a special guest today. We're welcoming Tyler from the 3 Bid League podcast. Hey, Tyler. Thanks for joining.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk A-10 hoops, even in the midst of roster construction season.
Yeah, there's still a lot of unknowns for sure. Tell us a bit about 3 Bid League, kind of how that all came about, kind of what you guys try to do.
So a great friend of mine, Matt Graber, and I been hosting this show. We're going to be wrapping up here season 8 throughout this off season. It'll be season 9 next year. We like to joke that we went even longer than Grant Golden at this point, but yeah, just started up. We just kind of wanted a platform to talk about various stuff around college basketball, and yeah, this is what we settled on. That at the time there were a couple of significant outlets covering Dayton specifically. Funny enough, most of those have now moved on, but so we tried to take on the mantle of the full league.
Nice. Yeah, I think when we so Porter and I went to University of Richmond a long time ago, and we're friends, and we're talking about doing something like this. And for Richmond, it just happened to be a time where there wasn't a pod. Like there's been a couple pods in the past, but it's been a few years, I think, since there was a Richmond basketball related pod. So we're like, why not try to fill that space? We're fans, alumni, so we're not professional media. Although sometimes when we get like a media pass, like we act like we're media. I guess we officially are media, but we're probably the least professional.
Yes,
media.
we're both personally rooting for Grant Golden to get another 4 years of eligibility because he's a pretty good player to root for us. So.
Well, hey, I mean, I think for the folks listening or watching, kind of the Richmond fans, kind of we thought getting Tyler on here would be great. While the roster is not final, it's kind of fun to be in this time where there's been some people brought on, some people have left. There's still some uncertainty, and 3 Bid League is a great follow on X, as they've kind of posted there this kind of tool, this retention tracker. Which is it's basically a Google sheet that you can look at, and they list kind of all the teams in the A-10. They categorize kind of returning players, and then there's a section on portal players. And just so anyone's seen it, they categorize your returning players as like a have to keep category, would hurt to lose category, and then a worthwhile contributor category. And then there's color coding and all this kind of information on who's in the portal is not. Richmond doesn't have anyone in the have to keep category. It's a little telling about how our last season and unfortunately the season before went. Aiden Argabright is in the would hurt to lose category. So as you kind of go through all of this, obviously that's kind of your descriptions of where players go. Like, how do you decide like who's in that like top category, have to keep versus worthwhile contributor? Because obviously our roster is pretty barren with great players, so we were like, we have to keep our Aiden Argabright because that's kind of the one star we thought we had. But kind of how did you guys go about pulling that together?
So between those two categories, 100% just my own personal discretion. Argabright was probably the best player I left in that second category, just because you think about how young he is and where that game has to potentially grow. And I took some liberties with like another non-all conference guy, Amael Latong over at Dayton. I put him in the absolute have to keep category. I think I could have done the same with Argabright, and especially with the fact that just coming out of this bad year, you kind of felt like if he was the only one that they kept, you'd still feel pretty good about those first couple weeks of the offseason. But it also hurt that AJ Lopez had eligibility. He could have been in that second category as well.
Yeah. I think he's one of those many 4-year players trying to find a 5th year, as the rules seem to always change. One thing I looked at it, and Tyler, you kind of know this best. I was basically counting through. So I think there's about 10 players in the have to keep across the A-10, and it looked like about half are staying and half are going. And in that next category, I counted 30 players, and almost the exact same. It looked like half were staying with their teams. The other half were either on the portal or had already gone somewhere. So it kind of shows where the A-10 is in this. We know we're not the kind of the top 5 conferences. And so like our best players with eligibility are often looking for more money and, brighter pastures. But does that surprise you that we're kind of in that, like, half the best players are leaving and half are staying?
Yeah, I mean, you bump down to like a Missouri Valley, those West Coast Conference, those really good other mid majors, and it's normally just complete and total carnage where you see maybe one good player stick around. The stat I would use to measure it right now, so 18 all conference players in the A-10, 8 of them are graduating. Of the remaining 10 who could return, 5 have already pledged to do so. And you just don't get 50% retention from all conference, basically, unless you're the SEC, Big 10, or Big 12 at this point.
I'm curious, like one thing that is too easy for us to do as fans is like when you see names, you get people signed, you get kind of excited and like, oh, these guys are going to be great. And I remember last year, I think we felt pretty good about the portal. And then when the preseason awards came out, like we had Walls as a preseason third team. None of our players on the portal made any of the teams, but other teams had players from the portal where kind of the media or coaches kind of voted them into like, hey, they could be, the top 18 players in the league. So like how do you coach us fans from not getting too over, like how do we judge whether, and we can talk about our players soon, but what's the best way to judge whether the guys that we're getting are really going to contribute or not? Because the media wasn't, the votes weren't wrong. We didn't end up with any of our transfers coming in being superstars or making the top 3 team. Like how do you coach us to not get too excited, or how do we judge these players that we never saw before who might have great numbers from wherever they're coming from?
Yeah, that's something we're all still kind of learning here, because it was so much easier back in the day when you're bringing in, say, 2 transfers onto an already set roster, and you could kind of think through like, oh, this is going to be this guy's role. I think Blake Francis, perfect example here, where you go back coming out of that awesome 2020 season for Richmond, and it's Gilliard and it's Golden and it's KO, and we know all these guys, and what they were missing is that one kind of killer wing scorer. And you get a guy in Blake Francis who was absolutely great at, God, it's been a while. Was he at like one of the St. Francis's or something? He's on one of
Yeah,
those
that
sounds
NEC
right.
teams, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And you could clearly tell, like, oh, this is the type of guy who fits a significant need. And we couldn't really guess at that point, could he be the type of 17, 18 point a game scorer he was at that level? Is he going to fall down to 10, 11? But you knew that he was going to fit. And so I think with Richmond, it may actually be a little bit simpler. And I don't know how much you guys want to get into the specifics of these particular transfers who are coming in, but like that center from Bucknell, the fact that he just profiles as a Chris Mooney type player, we know we can look ahead at that and say, yeah, he's going to be some level of impact player because Mooney's going to be able to figure out how to use him. Now, is he year 1 Jonathan Beagle? Is he year 2 Noah Quinn? He probably filters somewhere into the middle impact wise, but he's definitely someone who's going to be able to contribute something. And that's when it kind of just gets into the crapshoot guessing game of how good he actually is.
Tyler, in your experience so far of seeing the portal being open in this pay for play era, would you say you've seen a higher hit rate on A-10 teams who take a Power 5 role player who might, say average 4 points a game, 2.5 rebounds, and unlock some potential that they didn't get the chance to show on that P5 squad? Or do you think the better players have been from the minor conferences, but they were a star in that conference? What's been the better hit rate for teams?
Well, it's almost a different tier. If we're saying, hey, this guy, no matter what, is going to be a quality contributor, the 2 sweet spots are guys who prove themselves as legitimate rotation players at the P5 level, where sometimes you get a Frank Mitchell, comes in from Minnesota, someone who was a very good starting center in the Big 10 and explodes into one of the 10 best players in the A-10. More often than not, you get someone like a Jadrian Tracy over at VCU, who was just a very solid starter at the A-10 level, but those guys hit almost every single time as a good rotation player, as do players who are all conference at the lower levels. And even if you want to go pick down at the NEC, at the MEAC, those lower levels of Division I, if you're one of the 15 best players in your conference, you're going to be able to jump up to the A-10 and be a contributor. where I think fans, media, coaches, everybody at this point still struggle is figuring out how to exactly find those star level players, because then you're
Yep.
kind of just throwing at a dartboard again.
Yeah, and so I mean, fitting that kind of criteria you mentioned, so we got Jamie Kaiser Jr. from Butler, who was kind of a starter for Butler, kind of a big part to that team. Although they were a 500 team, it's kind of good to have kind of that fits part of that category. And then Amon Dorries from Bucknell, kind of as you mentioned before, kind of fits that, a star and a freshman star, kind of on a bad team in a lower league. So hopefully the two of them are kind of, they seem to be clear starters for us because we don't have a whole lot of options. But hopefully they're more than just, getting their 10 points because someone's got to score 10 points, but they're getting it because, we're winning games. And at least they both seem to be they have kind of an all-round game, it seems. Like, none of them are going to get 10 rebounds every game, but they both might get 5 and, block a shot or two, play good defense. So,
what's apparent to me is Mooney is focused more on length with the 3 signings so far. He's going for taller, longer players. What are your thoughts, Tyler, on the 3 guys? Andrew Ball being the third, a guard/forward from Monmouth that we just picked up this weekend. What are your thoughts so far on those 3 signings?
So it is funny because Chris Mooney, it seems like, never actually thinks about length because he always perpetually has like 5'11" guys on his team. But
yeah.
Jamie Kaiser, you hit on it. That is the perfect archetype of a really solid role player at a better level. Someone who was also a pretty low usage guy at Butler. And you really just start to dig into the deep numbers. I do not expect him to be at any level of star in the A-10. I can't imagine his role is really going to go up much. But just as someone who's going to rack up a ton of rebounds, who should be able to kick in a little bit better of a scoring output that he did at Butler. I mean, this is also a guy who never turned the ball over. I think that's probably one of the things that probably drew Chris Mooney and staff to him in the first place. But I expect him to be an average to above average starter in this league. One of the few incoming guys into the A-10 that, without doing a ton of research, I can say with some strong certainty on that. Dorries is the fun wild card. And when you go back, what are we at? Like 20-ish years of Chris Mooney now?
22.
I meant to count it out. I did not.
Yeah.
It seems crazy that he got hired before Mark Schmidt at Bonaventure, and now Schmidt's gone and Mooney's still there. But nonetheless, I actually went through and looked at every season he's had. And there's a direct correlation between having an above average starting center in this league and Richmond being good. Literally the only single year of his tenure that doesn't fit that is 2019, where young Grant Golden broke out and Richmond was still bad. But other than that, all of the good Golden years, the good Jarreau and Harper years, the good Klein years, that one awesome Neil Quinn year, Richmond has been really good. And so Dorries now becomes the single most important person to this entire roster. And I assume this will be, I would guess that, like Neil Quinn a couple years ago, it'll probably take a couple months, if not a full season, for him to really grow and develop. And hopefully there's an understanding there that he will be someone who sticks around a couple of years. Andrew Ball, I don't know a ton about, someone who didn't put up all that great of numbers in the CAA. If I had to guess, it seems to me like that's someone that you're putting together a budget. He's produced at the Division I level. Chris Mooney always likes to have 10, 11 guys. Someone you just bring in probably for cheap, and he can give you a couple minutes on the back end of the bench.
Yeah. No, I think that feels right.
And I think too, I mean, from Richmond's perspective, I think it's probably more than a rumor now. It's well known that we're going to spend more money in the portal this year than we have in the past. And I'm going to guess, and I don't think this is too provocative, that there are other players yet to sign that we will sign, and that's probably true for the whole A-10. But I think for us, there's still 1 or 2 more shoes to drop before we can kind of put the ink on the roster.
So, Tyler, I'm curious, kind of what you've heard or kind of what you've read and like what's happened with the A-10 and overall portal dollars. I think we've heard kind of St. Louis has been reports that they've got $10 million to spend on their roster, and Richmond, in theory and rumor, has gone from whatever 2 to 4 or 2.5 to 5. Like there's still a gap. Like we're trying to spend more, but if everybody's spending more, and I think was it Evan Mia had a report that when people are using his service, like it's 67% increase in pay for players. Like, what are you seeing across the A-10 in terms of like who's spending more? Is there what's the range of budgets? I know there's really no true transparency, so there's a lot of kind of reading the tea leaves. Like, what are you seeing out there with the A-10 budgets?
Yeah, I mean that 10 million figure for St. Louis might be accurate. If it's not, it's too low. They're clearly in the double digits from everything I've heard. VCU and Dayton, I don't think are quite at that number, but neither of them are particularly far away. And we're going to see that for at least the next couple of years, that those three are just going to outspend the rest of the league. They have more resources than everybody else. And then you get into those Richmond, Davidson, Loyola, Duquesne, St. Joe's, all these kind of mid-level budgets in the league where they're going to be a couple million. And then at that point, it really falls to your coaching staff and their ability to evaluate and their ability to budget. Can you pick up a guy for $400,000 who turns out to develop into an all-conference player? I mean, that's really just the game they're all going to have to play these next couple of years, and then we'll see. Because at some point, these power conference schools, like Kentucky's just not, well, actually, it's a terrible example because Kentucky doesn't care about football. So they might always have money, but like these SEC schools that really care about football are just not going to have 15 plus million in perpetuity because they're not making enough money off of this to do it. It's donors continuing to fill the coffers. And one day these guys are going to look around and be like, wait, our team just went 4-14 in conference. Why am I cutting them another $2 million check? And so I think now, granted, the question is, what level can a school like Richmond maintain in perpetuity? Is it 2 million? Is it 4 million? They're going to have to find that sweet spot. But even if they are stretching themselves a little bit thin, going from like 4 million back down to 3 million is not a huge difference when other schools might be going from 15 to 7.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about trying to find someone who could just you think you're smart, but maybe just lucky that you find someone cheap who becomes a great player. Like it's just not too long ago, we had Jordan King, who we didn't really know a whole lot about. And all of a sudden, like, I remember watching him the first few games. I'm like, I've never seen anyone shoot that good before in the Robins Center. And very quickly, you knew he was going to be a great player, and he was player of the year. And, took us, at least to a great record and a regular season title. But that's, you're kind of hoping you find someone like that who he was from a lower conference, but I think he was averaging, 13, 14 a game from the conference we got him in, and he turned into one of our best shooters. That was a 1 year, unfortunately, but it's hard to, you can't do that. Obviously, for 2 years in a row, we didn't find that person, and the team kind of suffered as a result. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, so Tyler, since you're paying a lot more attention to all of the teams, we kind of are focused mainly on Richmond. Tell us, as you look around the Atlantic 10, who do you see so far in the early portal improving? Who's at risk because they've lost a lot of really key players they haven't replaced? What's the landscape looking like in the 3-week mark or the 8-day mark maybe for the portal being open?
Yeah, well, your listeners are probably going to hate to hear this, but VCU's in great shape right now.
Yeah.
Where they lose 2 seniors to graduation. Terrence Hill's the only other guy to leave via the portal. He's headed to Tennessee, but they replace him with a guy in, let me check. At this point, I can't remember names quite yet, but Blake Harper, guy who was a 20-plus point a game
Creighton guy, right?
Yeah. 20-plus point a game scorer at Howard 2 years ago, was someone who was beginning to pick up some lower-level NBA buzz coming out of that season. Goes to Creighton. He's a pretty good bench piece there. He probably just shot a little too high. And now you take that half-level drop down to VCU, and that seems like a spot where he could really be comfortable, fill in, whether it's for Hill or for Jadrian Tracy. There's clearly a lot of minutes there on the wings. They got this guy Alston, who really slots in as just a backup for Michael Bell and Lazar Djokovic across the two big men spots, an all-conference player down in Conference USA at Middle Tennessee, extremely overqualified for a third big role at the A-10 level. I think they're still short like one more wing scorer to replace Hill, but they're going to be right back at the top again.
Yeah, and I think it's retention for them too,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, Nick Lewis is going to be he's just, like he can become the Terrence Hill next year, and these transfers can just become the Nick Lewis of last year, and they'll be just as good. And Brandon Jennings is a great player, so I think they've got some players who can, returning players who can fill that Terrence Hill role as being the star. And these transfers don't need to be that; like they can just be their fourth or fifth best player, and they're going to be.
And they get Djokovic back. He said he's
Yeah,
coming
that's
back,
right. He's a star.
Yeah, and in the other ones, I mean, Dayton has taken some very interesting swings. Jalen Haynes, the former second best player in the A-10 2 years ago at George Mason, went to Cincinnati, got hurt in training camp, never played a second for the Bearcats. He's going to be Dayton's starting center next year, which is wild to think about. They have a loaded front court. They're going to need one of these young, really unproven guards like a Travis Perry from Ole Miss to really turn out to be good, but the one interesting one besides Richmond that I'm looking at here as just really a wild card, taking a whole lot of swings group is George Mason. And they bring back their old point guard, Baraka Koji, who went on a walkabout to Memphis where he was terrible and then went down to Mercer where he was a first-team all-conference guy. He'll probably be the Patriots' best player next year. And then they went out and got a couple of really interesting guys. Lillian Marville, UNC Greensboro, led the nation in three-point percentage as a freshman. Didn't really do much else, but he's a killer shooter. They got another one of those just big-bodied perimeter defenders in, there's no way I'm going to get the name right, but Efiosa Atugu Elabor, who was playing with Jamie Kaiser over at Butler last year.
Yeah.
And I think we've learned to trust Tony Skinn at this point, that he knows how to pick these guys who have that one really good skill that'll translate up, and then he gets them in over the summer, and hopefully they can improve their other facets of the game.
Yep. No, those are good. And then you got St. Louis, who almost brought everybody back. I mean, obviously Avila graduated, but when you hear that they have 10 million plus, a lot of that was spent on keeping. I think they got 9 returners coming from the top 25 team. So I mean, that's kind of where you hope it's just an A-10 fan that like St. Louis will be preseason top 25 and is VCU like almost there, preseason top 25. So it would be nice if we can find a way in the out of conference schedule to get a couple teams in the top 25. It's been a while, it seems, since we've had that. And I think they're the natural two to do it. But like you said, Dayton's been there a lot, so we'll see if they can retool. What do you think about what's going on in St. Bonaventure? That's a school that, like the kind of coaching change, bringing a D2 coach who had a D1 and has publicly said he learned a lot and had to go back down levels to kind of improve himself. And now I think they've got just a JUCO player just was announced in the last day or so. How do you see St. Bonaventure in this kind of year one of kind of the new coaching regime panning out?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tough to evaluate here because we have not seen. So Mike McDonald, their new coach, was at the Division II level school named Damon, not too far away up in Buffalo. They've had a couple of really spectacular seasons here. They just went, I forget the exact record, but only 2 losses on the year. They made it to the Elite 8 at the D2 level. The 2 best guys from that team are following him up to St. Bonaventure. But there has been a ceiling to these Division II jump ups, whether it's both coaches and players, where we have seen the success of, I was going to call it DeVries, but Ben McCollum and Bennett Sturts at Drake for a year. We saw Josh Schertz at Indiana State. We saw a player in Wes Ennis at South Florida last year. That's kind of the ceiling. The A-10 is a little bit above that level right now. We have not seen a D2 coach jump up all this way. And I think you look at his struggles at Canisius, and it was in a very, very long time ago. He certainly did enough at the D2 level to deserve another Division I shot, but you almost feel like it should have been at a place like Albany or Binghamton, just like somewhere in the America East, the Metro, even the CAA, before you make the jump all the way up to the A-10. But St. Bonaventure at this point is basically saying, like, hey, we have less money than just about anyone else in this conference. We're going to take wild swings. And maybe they were right on this guy all along, and he doesn't need that little step up to prove it. Or maybe this was a complete and total whiff. It's one of the least certain I've been about a coaching hire in a long time in this league.
Yeah, and there was an interesting article in the Athletic, kind of talking about the whole Woj story and kind of how seems to be at odds with some of the local press there. So it's just kind of interesting, that whole dynamic of, you've got kind of a celebrity from ESPN who's took a sacrifice to come and help that school from a fundraising and GM perspective, and obviously after a year or two had to change coach, and we'll kind of see how that goes. One other team that's been interesting to me, and they seem to be a team that has been great. Obviously, they have one of the best A-10 players ever, or wasn't A-10 at the time, but you go to Davidson, and kind of that, they've got the Stephen Curry history, but they seem to have lost all of their good players from last year. And again, they weren't great, but that's a team that I just wonder, like, that school, like, how much money are they really spending, and are they able to? They haven't really been able to retain. And I'll be curious to see, like, are they able to reload? I mean, last year was a good, their first good year under kind of the new McKillop. And we'll see. Kind of, I'm curious to see if they're going to able to, put together a competitive team after they seem to have lost their guys that at least beat us last year.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because you're absolutely not the first person to say this. They lost their two best guys. Roberts Blooms is going to Penn State. Parker Friedrichsen's going to Washington. And then their most promising young guy in Devin Brown, who's still floating around in the portal right now. But they basically kept a good chunk of the rest of the rotation. Like Josh Scovins is going to be back. Nick Koval and Sam Brown, both of their point guards. They keep the promising young center in Ian Plateu. I think there was a lot of hope that this could have been a 2-year plan. That a guy like Friedrichsen, who comes in as a junior from Wake Forest, would have finished out his career at Davidson. That's a rough one for the degree. To go from the possibility of walking out of school with either a Wake Forest or Davidson degree, and you're going to end up with the University of Washington. That's not going to be great if the basketball career doesn't last a long time for young Parker, but they at least have some sort of foundation to build on, which they have not had in a couple of years. Now, the problem for Davidson, as always, they don't have the money to go out and go get a big time transfer. So they're going to pick up a couple of international guys.
Yeah.
They're going to pick up, they also got a young Butler player who didn't play much, but they're going to have to take big swings. And the problem for them is that they're going to need a couple of those swings to all hit the same year. They need one of these new guys to be great. They need Plateu to take a big step. They need one of the point guards to really emerge. If not, you end up with a situation like last year where Roberts Blooms takes a huge step and Devin Brown is better than we expected, but the rest of the roster didn't pull its weight, and you're mediocre again, and then you're losing the guys who took the leap up.
I remember when we played Davidson at home, Blooms just went crazy on us. Like, we couldn't do anything to stop him from three. He just was. So I'm not sad to see him go in some ways. How do you, taking I guess the portal has 2-3 more days until it closes.
Yeah. What is it? It's the
so
19th,
there's a point in time where
3 days.
Yeah. So there's a point in a few days from now. We've got some players who are returners that haven't announced in the portal. Like, at some point they become green on your spreadsheet. They become green when it's the 23rd and they haven't put themselves on the portal. So clearly we've got a few more days to at least for teams to know, are they leaving or not? Have they put themselves into the portal? And then, but there's really an indefinite time to when folks can get signed if they're in the portal. Obviously, practices start in June for most schools, so I think you'll see kind of most players get signed in May. But do I have all that timing right? I mean, it's kind of, we've got another month to figure out really what the final rosters look like.
Yeah, I mean, there were some very extenuating circumstances as to why it happened, but Dayton didn't get Keontae Jones till mid-July last year.
Wow.
Meaning kind of, well, and then hell, they went out and got Sean Pudi in the middle of December. He stunk, but whatever. You can sign guys mid-season now, as long as you can go find them in Belgium. But yeah, I mean, people continue to get confused by this idea that the portal closes and you can't sign players anymore. Like, this is not the old college video games where the offseason comes to a close and your roster's your roster. We're gonna have action well to Memorial Day in terms of guys still getting picked up. But we do at least get the clarity. And for Richmond, I think the two guys are the freshmen Harper and Robinson, that we haven't heard anything either way. So we'll know, I think it's Thursday morning, we'll know for sure on whether or not those guys are sticking around.
Yeah, and I think we saw Harper gain a tremendous amount of confidence later in the season, and he started to go from early on, he was kind of in Mooney's doghouse, to like suddenly a guy that Mooney trusted at key situations, at key times. So I think we both.
And then he got hurt.
Yeah.
And
so I think we both think Harper could take a meaningful step forward. J-Rob, certainly brings a different type of player. He's very athletic, very strong, a little bit undersized to play a 4 in the A-10, but we kind of play him at the 4. But I think there's the two guys that we have that are redshirt freshmen that bear watching. Obviously, Hominick, he's a big guy. He redshirted. We watched him in practice. He didn't look physically overmatched against our senior bigs. So he's already starting from a position of being a big guy. Whether or not he can play at the fast pace is still TBD. And then Donovan Richardson, I thought looked really calm and collected during practice. And then he took the year and redshirted as Mooney came on the show. He told us he was the point on the scout team. So he ran the scout team. So that gives him some great experience about running the offense. But what about our incoming recruits? Recently, Mooney went on, we did about a 30-minute press conference, and he said two guys he could see playing right away are Deuce Simmons and Dane Caldwell. Any thoughts on those names, or have you seen anything, in terms of what they bring?
Yeah, I'll confess, this time of the year, given that we just closed out the season, we're right into portal. I don't know much about many freshmen. The occasional, the couple top 100 guys coming into the league. So I know a little bit about Sammy Jackson at VCU, Aiden Durkak at Dayton, just because his brother was Jordan Durkak, who we obviously got to watch this year. So I know a little bit about that, but no, I will confess, the freshman learning and research is a summer project for me.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, I get that. You'd be really surprised to know that Deuce Simmons is a 5'8", 5'9" point guard. Be really surprised that Richmond's got another one of those. He's supposed to be great, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and Gilliard helped recruit him, and he's out of Kansas, which is where Gilliard came from. So it sounds like this could be our next Jacob Gilliard.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to see him and Argabright, at least backing up Argabright, and then maybe getting some time. It'd be very interesting if we have Argabright and him in the backcourt together. That's a small backcourt.
We better be pressing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, hey, thank you so much, Tyler, for joining us. It's great to get some perspective of the rest of the A-10 and someone who's not as blind to Spiders always having a potential as we may be. It's been a couple of rough years. We've turned into kind of big fans of the women's team as they've been kind of great. And of course, then we lost our coach to UVA. So we've got our own drama on the women's side, but hopefully the men's team this year can give us something to be excited about, because it's been a while.
Tyler, fun question for you. How many of the A-10 arenas have you visited doing the podcast, and what's your favorite one to visit and why?
All right, so I counted this out. See, this is because we're out of A-10 territory for a little bit. I've had to be thinking nationally throughout March and April, but let me run through my head real quick. I'm at 10.
And if your favorite place is the Siegel Center, just say you don't have a favorite, because we don't want to hear that.
I'm at 10.5 because I went to LaSalle pre-renovation.
Okay.
So I don't fully know how to count that. I have not yet been to Rhode Island, Fordham, or St. Louis.
Okay.
There's a lot of UD Arena bias. I've been there upwards of 100. I've been there close to 100 times probably at this point, but
Wow.
I mean, that's
Okay.
such a great spot. I really did enjoy the Siegel Center. I went last year. That was also the first versus second place VCU George Mason showdown on a Saturday afternoon. So one of the absolute best times to get into that building. I think really an underrated one because they just don't have the crowd. But I feel like the Charles Smith Center at GW could really be a great place to watch a game if they just had more fan support. I was in there.
I'll speak for Porter.
Yeah.
He likes to take credit for a missed free throw at a George Washington Richmond game.
Absolutely.
15 years ago or so.
You could hear me on ESPN. I screamed so loud. So I was the only Spider fan screaming when the guy shot the free throw and he clanked it. And then everybody, including the coaches, looked up at me and I got elbowed by my George Washington friend who was there. But yes, I did cost the kid 1 point. We went on to win the game, but it was by more than one. So
that's beautiful. I was there for a Friday night game, ESPN2 this year, and it was probably 70% full. And it was a pretty fun environment. That place is way too small. It's like impossible to move around in when there's more than 10 people in the building, but it could be a great environment if the people are there.
Yeah, it got loud back in the day too. Back when they were really good, that place was
Hobbs, the coach then maybe.
Yeah, it was loud.
Well, Tyler, thank you so much for joining. Why don't you kind of remind the fans or tell our fans kind of how they can find you and find your podcast and other material?
Yeah, kind of all over the place. You're looking for the A-10 specific stuff, just hit us up, the 3 Bid League podcast. That is the number 3. That's on your Apple, your Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. You can follow us. We do most of our social media stuff is just going to be on Twitter at 3 Bid League Pod. You can follow me personally on Twitter at TCRONS21. T-Crons21, and I'm doing some writing over at Busting Brackets. So as we make our way through roster construction season here these next couple of weeks, I'll be looking at a couple of things with the transfer portal through a national lens, and then an ACC podcast, Up the Coasts. You can find that on all your podcast platforms as well. If you're maybe like a UVA or Virginia Tech fan crossed with Richmond, I'm sure there's got to be a couple of those people who exist out there.
Yeah, there probably are. Yeah, someone with both degrees maybe, or a spouse with the other one. But anyway, Tyler, awesome. Thank you for joining. It's been a lot of fun, and looking forward to hopefully some fun things to talk about with the Spiders team for the next 12 months.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was a fun time.
Yeah. Appreciate you coming on. Have a great day, bud.